Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max. සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න. Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max. සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න.
දසනකාන්ති චූර්ණය සහිත ලීවර් ආයුෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වළකයි.
In your headlines tonight, bailout talks. IMF says assurances of Sri Lanka's creditors required to proceed with bailout package. Staff team to reach Colombo next week for policy talks. Demands. JVP-led National People's Power protest hampers vehicular traffic as they demonstrate demanding the government to dissolve parliament. Resumed. Sapukaskanda oil refinery resumes operations after months of inactivity over shortages in crude supplies. Gold. Sri Lankan para-athlete Janani Dharanjana wins gold in women's long jump at the Indian Open National Para-Athletics Championship. All this and much more coming up tonight, this Saturday, the 20th of August, 2022.
Vim Deera milliliter CA Smart Pack එක රුපියල් 85ට දැන් වෙළඳ පොලේ.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a warm welcome. I'm Indivari Amwatha joining you tonight with your First at 9 news. In your top stories, the International Monetary Fund announces that its staff team is scheduled to visit Colombo next week to continue discussions towards reaching an agreement on an extended fund facility arrangement in the near term. Nevertheless, the global lender said in a statement that approval by its executive board of the EFF program would require adequate assurances by Sri Lanka's creditors that debt sustainability will be restored. Since Sri Lanka reached out to the IMF, it has continued to maintain that Sri Lanka's public debt has been assessed as unsustainable and that it requires sufficient assurances of restoring debt sustainability during the restructuring process.
Despite months of turmoil that prevailed in the country, Sri Lankan authorities have been able to bring some relief to the people by managing fuel queues and reducing prices of domestic cooking gas, but the situation is far from returning to normalcy. Sri Lanka continues to depend on lines of credit and grants extended by friendly nations while awaiting an agreement with the multilateral lender, the International Monetary Fund. Sri Lanka has to still negotiate with creditors after announcing a preemptive default on all outstanding foreign debt totaling $51 billion in April 2022 as an emergency measure pending full discussions with the International Monetary Fund. According to Sri Lanka's central bank, the country's foreign currency reserves stood at $1,746 million by the end of June, showing a serious dearth in the country's coffers. Prospective receipt of $3 billion in bailout arrangement from the International Monetary Fund is expected to bring much relief to the country's forex shortage. The IMF held several rounds of talks with Sri Lanka, both virtual and in person, with the last mission in June on Sri Lanka's request, termed by the IMF staff team to have made significant progress. Issuing its latest statement on Sri Lanka, the IMF announced its staff team plans to visit Colombo from the 24th of August until the 31st to continue discussions with the Sri Lankan authorities on economic and financial reforms and policies. The team will be led by Chief of the Debt Capital Markets Division, Monetary and Capital Market Department, Peter Brewer, and Senior Economist of its Fiscal Affairs Department, Masahiro Nozaki, who were in Sri Lanka during the June mission as well. IMF said the objective of the mission is to make progress towards reaching a staff-level agreement on a prospective extended fund facility arrangement in the near term. The statement added that the approval by the IMF Executive Board of the EFF program would require adequate assurances by Sri Lanka's creditors that debt sustainability would be restored as the country's public debt is assessed as unsustainable. IMF staff would also continue the engagement with other stakeholders during the visit.
Now, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation has resumed operations at the Sapakaskanda oil refinery today after months of closure due to shortages in crude oil supply. Energy Minister Kanchana Wijesekara said 100,000 metric tons of crude is being discharged at present. The minister said CPC expects to receive the second crude oil cargo of 120,000 metric tons next week. With these two shipments of crude, the refinery will be able to operate at full capacity for 40 days. Meanwhile, the minister said that a cargo of jet fuel will be unloaded tonight. Now, Sri Lanka police is seeking public assistance to identify 50 people who are charged with forcible entry. Information is sought on 50 protesters who police say entered the temple trees, the Prime Minister's official residence, and damaged its properties on the 9th of July. On the 9th of July, mass protests gathered in Colombo and stormed key administrative buildings, including the President's House, the Presidential Secretariat, and the temple trees. Police released pictures of the suspects today, calling for public assistance to identify their whereabouts. Police have questioned and requested information to be shared on the numbers appearing on your screen. Now, the Australian government has issued travel advice on its citizens visiting Sri Lanka, warning that public emergency can be declared and curfews may be imposed at short notice. The Australian government warned that demonstrations continue to occur in Colombo and several violent incidents have taken place during large demonstrations. The travel advisory noted that they continue to advise to reconsider any need to travel to Sri Lanka due to the security situation in the country. Also in your news today, MP Dallas Alhapura said that the independent group of MPs in the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna will take measures to make a new political standpoint that would inform and form a new Sri Lankan society free of cooperation, corruption and nepotism.
The independent group of MPs from the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna who voted in favour of MP Dallas Alhapura during the parliamentary vote to elect a member to the new office of president arrived at the Jai Sri Mahabodhi in AdaDerana today. The parliamentarians had made their way to AdaDerana in one bus instead of using their personal vehicles due to the prevailing shortage of fuel. The MPs first paid homage to the Jai Sri Mahabodhi temple. Following this, they then visited the chief incumbent of Ruanveli Mahasaya, Venerable Pallegama Hema Ratanathera, and appraised him of their upcoming political program and obtained blessings. Later, the MPs convened the media in AdaDerana to explain their future political plans.
කුමක්ද අපි අදිෂ්ඨානය වහල් භාවයේ මානසික තත්වයකින් කටයුතු කරන වෙනුවට කෙසේද තේජාන්විත ශ්‍රී ලංකීය මානසික තත්වය ගොඩනගාගන්නේ ඒ වගේම ඥාති සංග්‍රහය මුළු මනින් මහෝසිකට කුසලතාවය මත පදනම් වෙච්ච නව ශ්‍රී ලංකීය සමාජය ගොඩනගා ගැනීම ඒ වගේම මේ පක්ෂ දේශපාලන වෛරසයෙන් ශ්‍රී ලංකීය ජාතික දේහ මුදවා ගන්නේ කොහොමද ඒ වගේම දූෂණය මුළු මනින්ම පිටු දැකලා දූෂිතයාට එරෙහි දඬුවම් කිරීමේ මානසික තත්වයකින් රටේ බහුතර ජනතාව සන්නද්ධ කරන්නේ. ඒක අපේ අදිෂ්ඨානය.
අද කාටත් ඉතාමත් පැහැදිලිව පෙනෙන දෙයක් තමයි ශ්‍රී ලංකා පොදුජන පෙරමුණේ පොහොට්ටුවේ ප්‍රතිපත්ති නියෝජනය කරන්නේ කවුද කියන එක. හදිසි නීතිය ක්‍රියාත්මක කිරීම. අපි තීරණය කළා ඒකට සහයෝගය නොදීමට.
And the Janata Vimukthi Peramuna seeks new public mandate. We'll find out when we return after this break.
Big 3.
The JVP-led National People's Party carried out a protest today demanding that Parliament be dissolved, allowing a new mandate of the people. They claim that the protest movement in the country ended the regime of the Rajapaksas and also ended political parties that had agendas that didn't suit or reflect the interests of the people.
The JVP-led National People's Power protest was carried out today, demanding the government to dissolve the parliament and to allow a new mandate of the people. The protest march that began in Vijayarama Junction made its way to Nugegoda. Later, the protest was carried out at the Anand Samarkund Open Air Theatre.
පෙරේද 18 වෙනිදා අන්තර් විශ්වවිද්‍යාල ශිෂ්‍ය බල මණ්ඩලයේ සිසුන් එක්ක පෙළපාලියක් ගියා. යූනියන් ප්ලේස් වල යූනියන් ප්‍රදේශයේ මගරකල හිටිය පොලිසිය ජනාධිපති මන්ත්‍රීකට හරුණ නෙවෙයි ජනාධිපති ලේකම් කාර්යාලයකට හරුණ නෙවෙයි අගමැතිගේ ගෙදර හරුණ නෙවෙයි පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට හරුණ නෙවෙයි යූනියන් ප්‍රදේශයේ පාගමන මගරකල පොලිසිය විසින් පහරකට පහර එල්ලකට පළව හරිනවා. අපි දෙල් කන්දේ දන්නු කීකට ආවා ස්වාමකාමී ഘോഷණය අපේ සටන් පාට කිව්වා මග රැකලා පහර දෙන්න ආව නම් රනිල් අපි අද නතර වෙන්නේ නුගේගොඩින් නොවන බව ඔබ මතක තබා ගන්න. එහෙම හැබැයි රනිල් ඔයා අපිව බියවද්දපු කාලේ ඔයා ගොඩක් තරුණයි දැන් ඔයා මහලුයි. මතක තබා. රනිල් රාජපක්ෂ කඳුර රඳා පවතින්නේ නැහැ ජනතාව මත. හැබැයි තව කඳවුරක් තිබෙනවා. ඒ කඳවුර තමයි මොකද්ද? ලක්ෂ සංඛ්‍යාත ජනතාව පාරක දහලා අපේක්ෂා කරපු දෙයක් තිබුණා. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ඒකට කිව්වා සිස්ටම් චේන්ජ් කියලා. මේ අරගලෙන් අවසන් කරේ රාජපක්ෂ කඳවුර විතරක් නෙවෙයි. මේ අරගලෙන් කුඩා කුඩා ලපටි සිකිති දේශපාලන තිවර කරලා තියෙනවා.
Taking you to business news, Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, says there are signs that the pressure on the exchange rate is reducing. Central Bank expects the foreign workers' remittances to increase in the near term. Dr. Veerasinghe points out that the black market premium over the exchange rate is diminishing. Meanwhile, Governor pointed out that the central bank's stance on restructuring domestic debt is that such a move would rather prevent the country from servicing external creditors and hurt the economy in the medium term. His remarks came during this week's monetary policy review briefing when he was questioned on the president making a recent statement that restructuring domestic debt was on the cards.
Position still remains that we will restructure, or we intend to restructure only the external part, because there is a balance of payment crisis. It's a foreign exchange crisis. We need more time to repay the external debt. So that is obviously the reason. With regard to the domestic debt, obviously when we are reaching that the creditors, they might ask what is the treatment for the domestic debt also. Our position is that if we restructure domestic debt, then obviously that will have a serious implications on the domestic finance sector, including the banking sector. That will not help even the external creditors to recover whatever the relief that they are going to give us. In the medium term, if we are going to have a problem with the capitalization of banks and any issue with the banks, and that will not help the economy to recover in the medium term. So that is a win-win situation for everyone, that we need to basically minimize any impact on the domestic debt so that we can maintain the financial stability, so that economy can recover faster and everyone can recover whatever the dues or relief that they are offering, even external creditors can recover their liabilities faster than what they expect if we can recover the economy with stable financial system. That's why our position remains that we want to minimize the impact on the domestic banking sector and domestic economy, EPF and insurance funds as a result of restructuring debt.
In the meantime, the governor gave an update on the future of the exchange rate.
The exchange rate is a flexible exchange rate and it's a managed exchange rate. We are seeing its pressure on the currency is now easing as a result of exports growing, imports are contracting, and we hope that trend will continue.
Further, Dr. Veerasinghe stated that while they see a stable amount of foreign remittances coming into the banking system, they expect that quantity to increase in the future.
පිට දකින විදියට යම්කිසි ආකාරයක බැංකු ක්‍රමය තුලට එන විදේශ විනිමය ආනයන ආදායම් සහ විදේශ ප්‍රේෂණ වලින් යම්කිසි ආකාරයක ස්ථාවර මට්ටමක තියෙනවා. ගොඩක් වැඩි වෙලා නැහැ. නමුත් වැඩි වෙකින් තියෙනවා. ඒකේ පළවෙනි අනිකුත් සාධකය තමයි ඒකෙන් පේන්නේ පහුගිය කාලේ තිබිච්ච අර බ්ලැක් මාකට් එකේ තියෙන ප්‍රීමියම් එක දැන් 365 ඔෆිෂල් රේට් එකක් තියෙනකොට 385 90 වගේ තිබිච්ච මට්ටම අඩු වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒකෙන් පෙන්වුම් කරන්නේ යම්කිසි ආකාරයක බැංකු ක්‍රමයට පිටින් එන මුදල් වල යම්කිසි ආකාරයක අඩුවීමක් තියෙනවා කියලා පෙන්වුම් කරනවා. ඒක නිසා බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා එතකොට බැංකු ක්‍රමය තුල ලැබෙන ප්‍රේෂණවල වැඩිවීමක් වේ කියන එක අපිට හිතා ගන්න පුළුවන් පේනවා මේ තියෙන කරුණු කීපයක්. එකක් තමයි ආනයන වල තියෙන ඉල්ලුම අඩු වීම. දෙවෙනි එක තියෙන බ්ලැක් මාකට් ප්‍රීමියම් එක අඩු වෙනකොට ඒකට ඉන්සෙන්ටිව් එකක් නෑ අයට වැඩිපුර මුදල් ලැබෙන්නේ නැති වුණොත් එහෙන් එන අයට බැංකු ක්‍රමය තුලට එවන්න පුළුවන් අවස්ථාවක් තියෙනවා. ඊට අමතරව අර විදේශ සේවා කාර්යාංශය තුලින් යම් කිසි ආකාරයක ඉන්සෙන්ටිව් ස්කීම් එකක් හඳුනාගෙන යනවා බැංකු ක්‍රමය තුලින් මුදල් ලැබෙන අයට යම් ආකාරයක පහසුකම් සපයන්න. ඒතකොට ඒ තුලින් යම් කිසි ආකාරයක වර්ධනයක් ඉදිරියේ වේ කියන එකත් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්න පුළුවන්.
Managing Director of Global Markets and Investment Banking at Capital Alliance Group says Sri Lanka's best shot at growth will be through gaining access to multiple markets. Addressing a lecture themed "Where Did the Money Go?", he said that Sri Lanka's option now to come out of the current economic crisis is to open the economy.
A lecture themed "Where Did the Money Go?" organised by Liberal Youth Movement was held recently at the Sri Lanka Foundation Institute in Colombo.
I believe that the open economy is one of the things that can get us out of this mess. The reality is our wages in Sri Lanka rupees at the moment has taken a 50% hit. And so, yes, exports will come, business will come, but that will take 4 or 5 years. But what has happened is you are seeing a huge wave of migration of migrant workers who are going into the UAE and countries like that because they are able to earn dollar wages. So effectively, we are exporting our people. That's what's happening. What's happening in front of you at the moment is the fastest export we can do at the moment is exporting our people. And that's what's happening. Now imagine if we had an open economy, we had a free trade agreement with India, and suddenly our Sri Lankans could go and work in the Indian IT sector. And the options were open across multiple sectors for Sri Lanka to get integrated into India's economy. So Sri Lanka's economy is not going to get out of this mess for a while. We may get out of this immediate emergency situation, but it is going to take us, I think the Southeast Asian nations after the Asian financial crisis took about 8 years to get back to where they were in terms of per capita GDP. So it is going to take us some time to get back to where we were. And in the meantime, actually gaining access to multiple markets is probably our best way to grow because Sri Lanka is not going to grow very fast over the next few years. So for businesses, for people, it's going to be tough going. So when you open up, and you give people the opportunity to access other markets because every free trade agreement will have both sides to it. And the reality at the moment is not many people will want to enter Sri Lanka for the next 5 years, but Sri Lanka can enter multiple other markets in the next 5 years. And that can be the reason that gets us out of this mess.
Now, Greece's exit today from the European Union's so-called enhanced surveillance framework for its economy ends 12 years of pain and allows the country greater freedom in policy making. The country's Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis said Greece's economic performance and policies have been closely monitored under the framework since 2018 to ensure it implemented reforms promised under 3 international bailouts totaling $261 billion from the European Union and the International Monetary Fund between the years 2010 and 2015.
EU officials had confirmed Greece's exit early this month, saying Athens had delivered on the bulk of its commitments. The Greek Prime Minister said in a statement that this brings to close a 12-year cycle that caused pain to the citizens. Prime Minister of Greece went on to say that exiting the enhanced surveillance framework means greater national leeway in economic choices. Greece was hit with a wave of pension cuts, spending constraint, tax increases and bank controls after it was forced to seek its first bailout in 2010. The economy shrank by 25% during the bailouts. Since exiting then in 2018, the country has relied solely on the markets for its financing needs. The surveillance framework was intended to ensure the continued adoption of measures to tackle potential sources of economic difficulty and structural reforms to support sustainable economic growth. Greece's emergence from the enhanced surveillance will also bring closer the country's goal of regaining an investment-grade credit rating.
And taking you to world news, at least 12 people have been killed in Somalia's capital Mogadishu after Al-Qaeda-linked militants attacked a hotel, seizing control in a siege that authorities are still battling to end. Now, the attackers blasted their way into the Hyatt Hotel on Friday evening with 2 car bombs before opening fire. Somalia's Al-Shabaab insurgents have claimed responsibility. Reuters reported that Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab group claimed responsibility for the attack, according to a translation by the site intelligence group, which monitors jihadist group statements. Al-Shabaab has been fighting to topple the Somali government for more than 10 years. It wants to establish its own rule based on a strict international, or rather interpretation of Islamic law. Sri Lankan para-athlete Janani Dhananjana secured gold in the women's long jump at the 4th Indian Open National Para-Athletics Championship in Bangalore. Her impairment falls under the T47 classification, which is for athletes with the movement affected at a low to moderate degree in one arm or the absence of limbs. Dhananjana's gold medal winning distance was measured 5.01 meters and 690 points. Meanwhile, Sri Lankan para-athlete Kumudu Priyanka, who won the silver medal at the same event under the T46 classification, jumped measuring 4.71 meters. Sri Lanka named the squad for the upcoming Asia Cup commencing August 27th in the UAE. Sri Lanka will begin the Asia Cup campaign against Afghanistan on the opening day of the tournament at the Dubai International Cricket Stadium.
Yesterday, AdaDerana reported that Sri Lanka was the only country that had not announced its squad for the Asia Cup 2022 among all other countries participating in the tournament. AdaDerana reported that even though Sri Lanka Cricket had named the squad seeking the sports minister's approval, the minister had not granted approval until yesterday. However, taking to Twitter at 9:51 p.m. yesterday, the Minister of Sports stated that he refused the allegation. Minister Roshan Ranasinghe said that he only received the documents yesterday and that he granted approval to the same within an hour's time. The minister then announced the Sri Lankan squad for the Asia Cup through his Twitter handle. However, the announcement is usually first made by the Sri Lanka Cricket. The minister then issued a letter calling on AdaDerana to issue a statement clarifying the news item carried yesterday. However, Sri Lanka Cricket issued a statement today confirming the news item carried by AdaDerana, stating that they had sent the proposed names of the squad to the minister on the 10th of August. In the meantime, the Sri Lanka squad for the Asia Cup 2022 will be led by skipper Dasun Shanaka and Charita Salanka as his deputy. Binuru Fernando and Kasun Rajitha, who were named in the original squad, will not tour owing to injuries sustained during the SLC Invitational T20 League 2022. Asitha Fernando and Pramod Madhushan are the proposed replacements for the injured duo. An uncapped 21-year-old left-arm seamer, Dilshan Madhushankar, has found a place in the squad. Another notable inclusion in the squad is Ashin Bandara, who had last represented Sri Lanka in July 2021 in the T20I against India. Also returning to the T20I mix are the experienced Dinesh Chandimal and Dhananjay De Silva and Jeffrey Vandersay, all who had missed Sri Lanka's last T20I series against Australia at home in June, which the visitors won by a 2-1 margin.
And And that's all for news tonight. Have a pleasant evening. We'll see you again tomorrow at the same time. Good night.